Let's do it.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Nick, joined by David and Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello there.
This is not part of the episode. We are recording this, months after the last episode was that the episode you're about to listen to was recorded.
Almost a year, no?
Something like that.
You can historians call that the Dark Ages. Like that's how long it's been.
Actually, if we're looking at this as historians, almost a year, that's like nothing. So we really haven't missed anything if you look at it that way.
Yeah, we haven't released an episode since February.
Here's all you guys need to know. When we recorded this episode, there was a Queen Elizabeth. Now it's King Charles.
Well, that could have been like a week ago.
It was fate. It was fate. We're going the wrong time period.
Speaking of which, all of our people at Mouthful of History, please pour one out for David, our sad British man who lost his monarch the other day.
I quit. I quit being his friend.
He's been fighting back the tears.
Yeah, the tears of joy.
He's been fighting as tears of sadness, and he wants to get his fingers like King Charles, just swollen up.
Just swollen and red, never having done an honest day's work.
No.
So jokes aside, we wanted to come and tell you why it's taken so long to release. We're going to explain to you why the gap is going to be bigger going forward. So first, David has relocated to San Diego, and Cameron has relocated to San Diego.
Yeah, who doesn't love moving 3 times in the span of like 2.5 years?
So that complicates things. And part of the reason why Cameron moved to San Diego, Cameron?
Well, I am getting my master's degree in history at San Diego State. Wow, I have moved in with David, and we are now roommates. We are now roomies.
And so, along with that, I have also gotten accepted to a master's program at Cal State Northridge. Not in history, I'm doing mine in screenwriting. So that's taken up a good chunk of our time. And David has some interesting news.
Yeah, so I'm going to be the father of my very own girl boss. Yeah, I have a little one, Nausicaa, due the beginning of March. We have different due dates from different sources, for lack of a better way of putting it, but like the first or the second is the due date, depending on who you consult. But yeah, so I have a little one on the way.
The second one was actually a tarot card reading.
So that's been kind of occupying our time lately. So we just haven't had the chance to get together to record. Caroline.
Not to mention, our editor has the nerve to like have her own day job and like a personal life, which I think is very disrespectful, but you know.
Caroline's been working full time.
I also have a bum wrist. So it's been very hard trying to edit anything. It's getting better, but it's also now getting worse again.
So my apologies for taking so long in the editing process.
Yeah, how dare you have like a day job and health concerns and a life, Caroline? I think that's messed up.
So yeah, that's why it's taken a little bit long time. We do have some episodes in the pipeline. We have one coming, but we just wanted to come in. We'd also like to let you know, if you are a patron, we are suspending the Patreon. We can in good conscience keep charging you for money, but we just can't keep up with any of that stuff. Now we suspend, you don't have to worry about that. If you want to know, the money you did help did go to good causes. The causes of helping Caroline better set up her editing equipment. So we will still record and we will still try to get episodes out to you. We'll just have to record them now in bunches over this winter and summer breaks.
It's like how Peter Jackson directed all 3 Lord of the Rings movies at one time.
Exactly.
That's
we are the Peter Jackson.
Those were, right?
We are the Peter Jackson of podcast. And this is our Lord of the Rings.
We are Wingnut Studios. And that's how we're doing it.
So yeah, we just wanted to come in and tell you all what's happening, and thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's about plagues, a topic that has no bearing on current events.
Yeah, just a completely abstract, unrelatable topic for the present moment.
Yeah, just a very low-key topic.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we look forward to getting more out to you as soon as we can. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your understanding. Peace and love.
Hey, Mouthful of History listeners, it's Caroline the editor. The episode you're about to enjoy was originally recorded as one full episode, but with a runtime at almost 90 minutes, and in the interest of giving all of our lovely listeners a new episode sooner rather than later, we've decided to give it to you as a two-parter. The first half is coming at you right now. Enjoy!
Michael Caine, greatest British actor of the last 50 years.
Whoa! This is where we're leading in with, man. I need time to think about this.
I'm going to agree, but that's just because I'm just not in the point to think about other British actors right now.
I mean, you guys know my opinion on the British, and it's not good, but Michael Caine is pretty cool.
Well, David, isn't your favorite food beans on toast?
You know what, Cameron? I thought we were friends, and now you're going in this direction.
David thinks mushy peas are guacamole.
Fuck off! I quit. All right, everyone, you heard it here, folks.
He also thinks marinara is too spicy.
What?
Sorry, I'm more mad at what Cameron said. I thought we were friends.
His preference for fish and chips is bland cod.
Man, I'm so upset right now that I can't even speak a coherent sentence.
David holds the lemon. He's like, nah, it's just tangy.
It's too tangy for my palate.
My favorite part about David and his blood vendetta against the British is that his last name is Hollingsworth, which, as far as I can tell, is an English name.
Wow, I can't believe you're doxing me, man.
He's being outed as a pseudo plant, as a British plant.
But I mean, if you've ever met David, he has beard and his hair grow with a reddish tint, which of course indicates a more Scottish
or Irish.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my dad is Scot-Irish. I mean, Hollingsworth isn't even his given last name. He adapted it from his maternal grandfather because he really looked up to him, and his biological dad was not a good dude. Not good, folks.
We can relate. On a mouthful. We here at A Mouthful of History are, if nothing else, a collection of people with daddy issues.
Yeah, different ones, so you can take your pick.
Yeah, there's varying levels of daddy issues here.
You don't become the host of a podcast without having some daddy issues.
Hot take.
I mean, looking around this room, I can't disagree with that sentiment.
Sometimes it leads to love of British food.
Not in my case, though.
I'm sorry, Cameron. I agree with you on a lot of things, but the full English sucks.
No, oh my God.
I think, Karen, you're just you were just perfect for that situation. I think most of us just are not.
All right, say what you want about British, beans on toast,
Gross.
Mushy peas,
Gross.
A full English fry-up is one of the heartiest breakfasts you can eat.
Hearty, but not good.
Oh my! So you hate sausage?
Yes.
You hate eggs?
No,
Eggs, beans.
Suck.
No,
There are
eggs
better
rock.
ways to prepare eggs.
Whatever.
Whoa.
There are better ways to prepare eggs. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the best way to prepare eggs.
I love a over easy fried egg.
You know the best way to prepare eggs?
Good.
What?
Throw them in the fucking trash.
No.
Eggs are garbage.
Nicholas Michael Malott. Scrambled eggs, bomb. Poached eggs, bomb.
Scrambled eggs, you're a fucking child.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a problem with that?
I'm sorry, I don't like eggs, and it's funny too. I didn't used to hate eggs, but as I've gotten older, I don't know. Maybe it's a post-COVID thing. Some things don't taste as they used to before COVID. But I've realized I don't like eggs.
Yeah, most of the people in this house don't like eggs. We buy a 16 carton of eggs and it lasts us 2 months.
It's for cats baking.
Yeah, it's for cats baking and for me to every once in a while eat when I make breakfast.
I don't have time to cook an egg, which is the sucky part because I love eggs.
Damn.
Every month where I buy some chorizo and I make.
Oh shit! Eggs. You actually have chorizo in the fridge right now.
I tried making over easy eggs one time and the egg yolk literally became what you would get on a McGriddle.
So you cooked it to over hard.
Over hard. It was like a McDonald's McMuffin stuff.
Dude, it's not that hard. You just put it on the thing and let it sit there for a bit, flip it, let it sit there a little bit longer, and then pull it off. It's 2 minutes maybe on both
Yeah,
sides.
well, it's my cooking adventure is a trial and error process.
All right,
so
but I
that's,
do have a hot take to close out our opening segment, and that is that chorizo is better than anything the British have ever
Oh my
made.
god,
Yeah, that's
chorizo's
fair.
so good.
that's really fair.
Yeah. Okay. Mouthful of history. We here approve of chorizo as the premier breakfast.
Yeah.
And chilaquiles too, while we're on the subject.
No.
Yeah.
Whoa,
what?
hey, whoa.
Have
Chilaquiles
you
are
even
good.
had
Hey,
those?
That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a hate
Oh, okay.
crime against part of my heritage.
And part of my heritage too, and part of Caroline's heritage for that matter.
Yeah.
That's true. Caroline, all right, you're the tiebreaker. Chilaquiles.
I've actually never had them.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all
right.
right.
It's like beans, right? And like chorizo or
No,
No.
it's like
Oh fuck.
it's like
What
how
the
do you
fuck is
explain
it?
them?
Yeah, I don't know how I'd explain them. It's like it's
I've always seen them prepared with tortilla chips.
yeah, they
Oh.
cook them in a way to where the tortilla chips become soft, and then it's just mixed with like various other like normal Mexican food.
Maybe it's
ingredients.
because
okay.
every time that I have them, it's always mixed with enchilada sauce. I don't like enchiladas; they're my
Yeah,
least
you do
favorite
not
Mexican
enjoy
dish.
enchiladas.
Okay, yeah, I mean there are a lot of really different ways to prepare them, so it just kind of depends on the version you have.
Just not an enchilada fan. Now, obviously, part of that is because cheese, but
Fair.
but anyway, yeah, that was Once again, we have coming in with the hot food takes that Nick's always right, like the Mountain Dew Baja Blast.
Oh my!
Roll the credits, Caroline.
No.
Andrew Jackson. Fuck Andrew Jackson. Fuck Andrew Jackson.
We're just gonna die like patriots.
There's nothing better. There's no bigger middle finger. Hey, you want to put me in the suicide mission? Okay, I'm just gonna keep living.
He clearly figured out how to go Super Saiyan.
He wanted Schmeling dead, but he just wouldn't die.
He was anti-bank, anti-paper money, and he's on the $20 bill.
Nego just comes out of nowhere, soars across the sky.
All right, everybody, welcome
you
back to a
bastard,
mouthful of
Nick.
history. Well, Cameron is still, soothing that burn.
Ah! Stop! Nationalize Baja Blast, Nick. Fuck. That's the
Why don't we nationalize a good soda? Anyway,
Baja Blast.
we are actually here with a special guest, making her actually on microphone debut.
Yeah.
It's Caroline.
Hi.
How's it going, Caroline?
It's going good. So I actually picked this episode for the voice to record. Today we're going to be talking about the plagues. So I minored in history, specifically colonial history, but I do enjoy a few European history things like the Black Death. Very interesting to me. So I wanted to have the boys do an episode on it because I think it's very important to draw similarities in history so we can see them and not repeat them. There's a beautiful quote that I always see going around. I can't remember what it is, but it's basically
Baja Blast is great.
no. But it's basically about how, if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I think it's very important that we learn and we see correlations between what has happened so we can try and prevent what does happen. And so that's why I felt like doing an episode about the plagues, because obviously we're still in, and I mean we're still in, there's too many people who act like we're no longer in a pandemic, and that is not true. We're still in the middle of it. We'll probably be in the middle of it for quite a long time, as obviously we all know the Black Death went on for how long? Nick has that note.
But hey, I mean, at least right now in the present, we have better medical science, and therefore no real excuse for it to last super long, right, folks?
Yeah.
7 years, but of course with on and off.
Yeah, that's
with
true.
On and off recurrences throughout the
Yeah.
14th and 15th century.
Exactly.
Like
So
syphilis.
Yes.
actually, yeah, that's a fair point.
And it's funny because these pandemics are once in a generation, but they always do happen because, well, part of it now is kind of a global warming thing. We are melting away permafrost that has been holding microbes. I'm not saying COVID is related to this one at all, but it's possible that we could have a lot more pandemics in the future because we are basically exposing to the earth microbes haven't been seen in thousands of years.
And therefore, like, microbes that we don't have any built immunity toward.
Yeah.
Remember the Imagination Land series of South Park?
Yeah.
The doors of the evil characters blows up and all the evil characters start coming in. I feel like it's kind of like that.
Oh no,
Yep.
yeah. Like a Pandora's box.
Pandora's box is going to be opened, and it's not going to be Christmas critters. It's going to be diseases that are we've never seen
That would-
before
yeah.
in thousands of years.
Yeah, we're gonna see once in a lifetime pandemics like every decade.
Oh no, thank you.
Possibly.
I would like to-
Possibly.
I would like to try and live my life at some point. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be nice. Now, before we actually hop into the episode proper, just remember that a lot of people have said this is like the worst pandemic since the Spanish flu, the one that we're currently living in right now. That is a level of erasure that I'm not comfortable with. Let's not forget that we're still living through the AIDS pandemic,
That's true.
Good point.
That's fair.
that most governments have no actual vested interest in actually doing anything about, because
Yeah,
the people
'cause we
who are
didn't do
affected
anything.
by it are gay.
Yeah, disproportionately LGBTQ and also disproportionately poor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely terrible.
Reagan, for instance, go fuck that guy.
Yeah,
Oh
fuck
yeah,
Reagan.
fuck that guy. Yeah, fuck Reagan.
Yeah.
We gotta do an episode at some point that's literally just talking about how horrific Reagan was.
That's
Actually-
actually one of the things I want to cover. Is going to be like Reagan's governorship, Reagan's presidency.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward to that one. Oh,
Because it's important. A lot of us don't know about that stuff. Because how far did my schooling go? Civil rights, maybe. That's about
Yeah.
it.
right.
All of our history classes ended with the civil rights movement, and it's like, yeah, history is over right there. That's
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
exactly.
Mine ended at the Vietnam War and Watergate, but yeah, essentially the same point, right? Like, definitely not going to Reagan and covering his crimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like mine was Desert Storm.
Oh wow,
Oh,
you got
so
that
we
far.
got that far.
Wow. I think honestly, I might have even pushed into the ERA. That's probably about as far as I've gotten
Oh,
in
okay.
any history.
Like the ERA,
aspect.
like debate in the 70s.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And that was in community college. That's about as far as I've gotten.
So yeah, Caroline, take it away.
Okay, I just really wanted to say really quickly, other than all that other fun stuff I just said too. So the three main plagues we're going to be talking about are going to be the plague of Justinian. Then we're going to obviously talk about the bubonic plague / the Black Death / the Black Plague, all those fun words that we can use synonymously for the plague that happened during the medieval period. And then there's going to be a third plague, which not a lot of people know about. We call it various things. The one I'm going to call it, imagine maybe David will call it too, would be like the third pandemic. And that one actually takes place in various places, but it also goes to the USA. So that's going to be some fun information for you guys if you didn't know that. I know I didn't. I only learned that recently. So yeah, technically Cameron has the opening plague. So Cameron, if you want to take it away.
So battling off today, we're going chronologically. So this is the real first introduction of the bubonic plague. Not in the world, but like at least we know from ancient history. So, it's called Justinian's Plague because, fun fact, Emperor Justinian was the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, but at the time it is still consider themselves Roman, so semantics, you either want to call it the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, whatever you want, same thing. So the thing is, the biggest outbreak of this plague was 541 to 543, but it didn't end until 730 CE.
So almost 200 years.
So
of
there was
plague.
Shit.
there was various outbreaks that were not that bad. Like the first 3 years were terrible, but after that, like the plague kept showing up in the Mediterranean until 730. We talk about this, like the COVID. Oh, it's going on forever. I'm like, Justinian's plague happened for like 200 years on and off.
That's really shitty to think about.
The downside to diseases like this is because they're based on infections. We wouldn't be able to eradicate that stuff until penicillin. So.
Yeah, especially when you didn't know like what's causing it, you know?
Yep.
Wasn't that for syphilis?
Oh, probably. I mean,
Penicillin?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying basically the discovering antibiotics basically
Yeah.
helped kill this stuff.
also you could still get the plague now, but there is antibiotics to take
Well,
care of
the thing
it.
is, the fun fact is squirrels carry plague.
Well,
Squirrels carry plague. So,
So
you
damn
see,
squirrels.
innocent.
And you just
So
thought you were
have
worried about,
one in nuts,
and you thought you were just gonna have to worry about rabies.
Nope,
Yeah.
don't fuck with squirrels, ladies and gentlemen. So you might ask yourself, what is bubonic plague? Well, bubonic plague in its Latin name is Yersinia pestis.
By the way, take note of that name because we'll be talking about its roots when we get to the third pandemic later.
So you get these swollen lymph nodes with really big black buboes. You can get shock. You can get loopy, chills, fever. Like it is just it's fucking deadly. But now we have antibiotics, so we don't have to worry about another one. Just don't mess with squirrels. And
Don't take that squirrel's nuts.
There goes
Yeah.
my favorite activity.
David's squirrel nut taking. Squirrel nuts.
Yeah, now I have to find another hobby, but it's fine, I guess.
All right, so because it took place, in the 500s, the 6th century CE, there's a few sources on it. So we have a few writers that sort of touched on it, who are like the main people at the time. So one of them was John of Ephesus, and he was the leader of the Syriac Orthodox Church in the 6th century. But we have to reverse back to 536 AD. So there was a volcanic eruption that caused the world temperatures to drop 2 to 3 degrees Celsius.
Yeah,
Can we get one of those again?
Yeah, it was so severe it basically triggered a mini ice age.
So John of Ephesus wrote this down as he saw what was happening. There was a sign from the sun, the like of which had never been seen or reported before. The sun became dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone about 4 hours, and still the light was but a feeble shadow. Everyone declared that the sun would never recover its full light again.
People back then were stupid like that.
It was the most severe weather in 2,000 years.
That's crazy.
So what this happened was it's basically cold AF, causing famine, disease, crop failure, and basically the weather sucked.
But
But
like I
here's
said, a mini ice age. It basically triggered a mini ice age.
yeah, and so there were rats that carried Yersinia pestis. You think cold weather, it brings everyone in, right? Yes, it does.
Huddled together.
Huddled together. So what I think happened was that these plague rats hung out with the city rats that the humans interacted with, and those fleas jumped on humans. Basically, if we're trying to put like a more logical outcome of why this happened, like we have to look at this weather event because it was one of the coldest years on record. Everything just was shit.
I wonder if people were also more likely to cook and eat those rats because their crops were failing.
Yeah,
Possible.
Could be.
possible.
Also, we have Evagrius scholasticus. If I had a
mouthful.
name like that, that would be great. Like,
That sounds like
Like-
something they'd encounter on the magic school
I'm
bus.
sorry.
man, Scholasticus. This man knows everything.
That's the reason why we have scholastic book fairs
I don't know.
off of him.
You know,
That'd be a fun one to look up.
but the funny thing is like really Latin, the Roman Empire stuff. That's just the golden age of names.
Yeah.
So just add like us on the end of everybody's name here.
So, like, Scholasticus, he survived the plague at an early age.
oh,
And
nice.
so he wrote down the symptoms he got from it in his ecclesiastical history. So he was one of the other guys in there. But we're going to go back to the guy, the man who was at the center of everything in the Roman Empire. And he is probably one of your more spicy people. Procopius of Caesarea. So
I
he
know
was
that
born.
guy.
He was born in Palestine. We're gonna get that name. So he was the legal advisor to Belisarius in Justinian's wars against the Persians, the Vandals, and the Goths. You know, they had to really fight off Sisters of Mercy music playing in North Africa.
Yeah, but I think we can all
Well, no.
agree the war was over
No, that's
when
the
they
Vandals. That's the Vandals. The Goths. Yeah, we're trying to fight off the Sisters of Mercy in the Siege of Rome. So that's
Yeah,
We're
I
playing a
think
lot of
the war-
hardcore metal music.
I think the war was over though as soon as they started attacking the black eyeliner supply lines.
no. It's so he was the lawyer to like cover people's asses.
I'm just a simple country lawyer, but let me inquire about your taste in hot topic clothes.
Well, he also wrote about the weather change. So during this year, a most dreaded portent took place. For the sun gave forth its light without brightness, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in the eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear. He also was the first to write down where the plague started, what he thought where the plague started. He said that it had origins in Pelusium. So this is Egypt. So Pelusium, for all you nerds out there who have a map on you for some reason, Pelusium is a fortress town in front of the Nile Delta. So if you want to get through to Egypt, you get through to Pelusium. You have to go through it. What he thinks happens is that the grain shipments that were coming to Constantinople, the rats were jumping on. And so that's when plague hit the city. And so
So wait, so this is what Procopius was hypothesizing.
well, he said like it started in Pelusium, and then the rats on the grain shipments went to Constantinople. Of course, you can't really prove anything back then because we don't have the same. But it just you see it. Like let's talk about this for a few seconds. Just because you see it, the first outbreak happen in a city doesn't mean it came from there.
Yeah, this
that's
is
fair.
the Spanish flu all over again, which, you know, people blamed on Spain, but that's just because Spain was actually reporting on it. So
So let's put it this way. Procopius only wrote about this in his book, The Secret History. So you can either look at it two ways. One, he hated Justinian, Theodora, and Belisarius. Or two, this was a kind of like a get out of jail piece if the emperor died. Because back then, succession, Justinian left no heirs. And then the plague hit. So,
Dun, dun, dun.
so about 5,000 per day were dying in Constantinople.
Oh, fuck.
Jesus.
So then what they're doing is they're stacking bodies in the street. Sometimes they were reopening graveyards to
Oh,
like
yeah.
make sure you put those bodies in. And it was hitting like crazy.
Also, like, we should probably go back to that 5,000 per day figure, because we might be, if it's not explicitly said, we might be tempted to think about like how bad 5,000 per day would be in the present, where we live
Right.
in cities of tens of millions, and that's still obviously incredibly tragic. But this is during a time where cities are not nearly as big as the cities today. So if you're losing 5,000 per day, that is an immense amount of your population.
it also means that the wheelbarrow bring out your dead joke in Monty Python.
Yeah, that's pretty
that's
accurate.
actually not 100% inaccurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when this started happening, they tried enacting some measures. One of them is quarantining.
Jesus.
Oh,
Hey,
man.
quarantining.
Wait, do we know where that word came from? Because I do.
Go ahead, Carol.
Fun fact. Okay, so quarantine came from like when the ships would bank. This is, I think, specifically more towards like the Black Death. In Italy, they had to wait like 40 days before they could get on land. And so they would call it a quaranta, so quarantining. So they had to stay on the ship for like 40 days
Oh.
before they could actually
Spicy.
before they could come on shore to make sure they didn't have the plague.
Damn. That's
So-
interesting.
Yeah.
So what happened was that they tried to limit traveling to like farmers markets, like moving food and stuff all over the place. It wasn't a statewide mandate, so if you were rich enough to quarantine, you were able to quarantine.
Does that
You don't
sound
say.
familiar?
Yeah, it sounds
Oh,
familiar.
This is happening like 1,500 years ago. Holy shit.
And then also public hospitals like came up. So they're backed by wealthy and state officials, and they popped up across the empire. Of course, we know the public hospital place to treat the sick. There's also nursing homes, social gathering spots. They couldn't handle the plague, but they did make attempts to quarantine individuals. They did the best they could. Basically, in the words of Ivan Drago, if he dies, he dies.
Dang.
So basically, if you lived, you were blessed by the Lord. So you can make the argument that because the plague hit the Byzantine and Sasanian empires, it helped Islam spread quickly. But, that's very contentious. Even then, Emperor Justinian himself got the plague. He himself got the plague in 542, but he recovered.
Go him.
But here's the thing. Building projects were put on hold. Justinian's conquest stopped for the time being, but they eventually did take over the Italian peninsula. Remember the SpongeBob meme? Like, we did it, Patrick. We saved the city. Like, they literally annihilated the entire peninsula just to get, like, there was nothing left.
We did it, Patrick. We're heroes.
Love a good SpongeBob reference.
What did it cost? Everything. So, but here's the thing. It's very dubious to know what the real impact of Justinian's plague happened in the Mediterranean. It is the same plague that affected Europe in 1348, but reading on it, we like to extrapolate how bad the Black Death was, and we like to presuppose it onto Justinian's plague. But the thing is, it's contentious. A lot of the sources, like even Procopius and Gregory of Tours, they barely mention it. It was a very barely mentioned plague. They talked about natural disasters more than the actual plague itself. And I mean, like, Justinian, like, yeah, he just kept taxing the shit out of everybody. He was even going after dead people's estates. So it was just like, yeah, it's like business as usual kind of thing. I reckon it did affect the Mediterranean a lot. But the thing is, most accounts are over exaggerated. So either it was an act of God, or someone had a beef against Justinian. Like, hey, homie killed 1 trillion people. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he killed 1 trillion fulfilling people. This guy's a demon.
Which, by the way, just to explain that real quick. So Procopius was a historian, scholar, generally speaking, and he had his public front-facing histories that he published in which he praised the emperor, but then he had the secret history, which he never published. An interesting contrast between his public histories that he published and his secret history, which is why it's called secret, it was never published, was in the secret history, he was like, oh man, the emperor killed like 1 trillion people, more people than existed, or, have ever existed, and just generally had a very different set of opinions than he did in his public histories.
It was the postings of its day.
Yeah, it was the secret shitpost account.
Yeah, and so like we tend to kind of think, oh, the Black Death was bad. The Justinian Plague would have been bad as well, like the same impact. Well, there was a study done by the National Academy of the Sciences of the United States of America, concluded that there were huge changes between the 6th and 8th centuries. The plague didn't cause them because they looked at papyrus sources. One of the best documents that were preserved in ancient times and even in the Middle Ages was papyrus, because the moisture was able to like preserve them really well. So they had over 500 papyrus sources. Tax revenues didn't really change. Coinage didn't change. Population size, like it really, the papyri that were saved, it kind of just seemed like everyone was doing all right. Like everything was actually business as usual sort of thing. And I think just because we don't hear about Justinian's plague that much, it's kind of like, yeah, it must have been bad, but I think things could have been much worse.
Mm-hmm.
There was like arguments made the Rashidun Caliphate was able to sweep through the Byzantine and Sasanian empires because of the plague. But the thing is, Rome and Persia just were always constantly at war with each other. So I think them like knocking themselves out.
It's like how they said hi to each other, basically.
Yeah. So to know the true impact of the plague, it is contentious, but for going off what we have in terms of information, it seemed like, yeah, there may have been like 1 or 3 bad years, but it's like, oh, well, everything kind of didn't change that much.
Especially compared to the bubonic plague.
Whoa.
All right, so really quickly before we start the bubonic plague, I have a fun little story, a very morbid fun story to mention. So one of the things they believe was the first start of the plague, like the Black Plague specifically. In 1346, the siege of Kaffa. Who's that between again? I'm sorry.
It was the Mongols and I think the
people
Russian
who
people there.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. During the siege, a lot of the people were dying of the plague, and so they just launched their dead over the walls. And that is the first instance of biological warfare, guys.
Damn.
You're welcome. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
All right, the bubonic plague. Well, it's one of the most talked about pandemics of all time. You know it. I know it. If you've spent any time in a Western history class, you've heard about the bubonic plague. So I won't be touching on too many things more than you don't already know. The bubonic plague was at any times referred to as the pestilence, the great mortality, the plague, the Black Plague, and most commonly the Black Death.
Bum, bum, bum.
It occurred all over Europe, basically Eurasia as well, and Africa, specifically Northern Africa. And it is one of the most important singular historical moments of all time, and we'll get to that here in a second. As with the Justinian Plague, the idea of how it was spread was that rats traveling on trade ships would come off and the fleas would jump and they would bite people, and that would help spread this fleas from black rats or where the bubonic plague is carried.
And then it gets airborne.
After
After
that. Which is the scariest thing about diseases. Once they get airborne, you're fucked. All of Europe is devastated by this, and some estimates as much as 50 to 65% of the population were just wrecked.
What other plague other than the ones that hit the Americas from the Europeans has ever been that devastating, right?
Yeah, just to set the stage, Europe at the time is a series of feudalist states. That means that you have people tied to the land. That means everybody is living in these kind of like tiny communities.
Yeah, there's not really a central authority as there had been, say, during the time of Justinian.
Yeah, it is very decentralized. So when something like this will happen, there's not really a lot of recourse for it. You just kind of have to let your like lord deal with it. Of the countries, one of the most devastated was England, which kind of makes sense because it's on an island. So it's the most contained of all contained countries in this situation.
Yeah, the plague was like, I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me.
You're trapped, bruv.
Oi, governor, you're trapped in here with me, ain't it?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
France too.
In it, bruv. They get like the plague adopted Cockney accents.
So when the plague broke out, you would have things like clergy, for instance. We have a kind of a thing with religion, but the clergy at the time would try to go help people because that's their goddamn job. And they would also get sick. And that was actually kind of one of the most striking things about the Black Death is that it didn't really care about societal status. Cameron mentioned like Justinian got the plague. Diseases don't care about your wealth, your status. You're going to get hit if you come into contact with it. Now, some of the rich could get away with this by going to their country estates away from the conglomeration of people that were occupying the territories at the time.
You can see the Decameron and The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
Yep. And the Decameron is one of the most like seminal primary sources about the Black Death, even though it's fictionalized, but it's basically an example of what people did.
Oh, fun fact, while the Black Death is going on, England and France are still fucking competing in the 100 Years' War for the battle for the French throne.
Yeah, speaking
Oh
of
my
two
God.
cultures that war all the time basically is just a way to pass the time. England and France, right?
It's a glorified battle against French people.
Basically. Actually, yeah.
French people versus French people going over some French things.
Yeah, in my research, I discovered that on top of the devastation of the Black Death, the male population specifically was devastated because they're all fighting in the war.
Oh, so kind of like in World War II?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is just wrecking like France and England. And I'll pull up the numbers here towards the end. but-
How are you supposed to produce for your country if all the men are dying?
Hold up. We're not talking about Italians here. Italy was the worst hit.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, isn't that funny? Yeah. Wasn't Italy the worst hit, too, at the beginning?
We had a
of
mouthful
ours?
of history. Do not condone Italian. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Mamma mia.
We're not.
Mamma mia!
We're
Oh
talking
my
about.
God.
We're not talking about Italy because this is a no Italy podcast.
Damn.
Hey. That's a spicy meatball.
Yes.
Uh,
But yes, it's important to mention that because a lot of the trade came through the Mediterranean, which of course is Italy, they were the hardest hit. However, they do have a bounce back because the devastation of the plague is basically a lead into the Renaissance. So
Yeah, it's also
Hey.
kind of worth noting that like Italy being the port is of course going to mean that it's the first hit, but it also is therefore being connected to the rest of the Mediterranean and even indirectly like kind of, more of Afro-Eurasia. It means they're also kind of the most advanced for the time, so they're hit really hard, but whereas they're a little bit more kind of cosmopolitan and a little bit more developed, when it hits England and France, they just do not know what to do.
Oh, God, yeah. Because, I mean, let's be honest, shit was disgusting then. They
Oh, yeah.
drop in your feces in the river and then somebody downstream's using it to drink.
Like in Elizabeth,
Fucking
like
gross.
Elizabethan England, like you were taking dumps outside your window.
Yeah,
like, you're like
absolutely
duck and cover.
disgusting.
Yep.
I saw a really interesting thing, just as an aside, where it was basically like, why do we always say Europeans, like British, why do we always say that they're so advanced when they're motherfuckers who kept getting sick from things like typhoid and stuff like that because they can't fucking just realize that they need to separate their sewage from their drinking water.
Folks, they drank that doo-doo water.
yeah.
The chocolate water.
Oh God. Yeah.
Watson, that's not chocolate. Don't eat it. Don't drink it.
Oh, I mentioned the clergy and the clergy deaths. With the dead just dropping day by day by day, they're running out of clergy members to administer last rites.
Damn.
And eventually this would lead to multiple parishes need to be seen by one person. And parishes are not like now. You have to travel several days by horseback to get to the next parish.
Damn.
It's amazing how much this singular moment just destroyed every part of society in Europe. Just nothing they could do. And by the way, this would also eventually lead to the clergy being less involved in helping people after this because they were like, oh, well, we can't be dying.
And yeah, that's when religious people were like, wait, maybe we shouldn't help people. And the church has done nothing but good things since.
It leads up to the Reformation as well.
Yes.
Like that's
This is another one of those, like I said, this is a seminal moment. The seeds are being planted in every other direction for
what would come next.
So, what is the ultimate effect of the Black Death? Well, the Black Death really can be seen as a transitional period between the Dark Ages and the Renaissance and what would eventually become the almost proto-modern world. When you have that many deaths, especially in all levels of society, things have to change. So with a lot of the death being focused on the poor, you really couldn't have serfs just working the land. There's just not enough people to work the lands anymore. So what happens? Well, now these poor people can now actually demand some more wages to fix these basically abandoned grain fields because there's just nobody to work the lands anymore. So this kind of really leads to the end of serfdom and more towards the start of, I don't know, what would you call it, David?
Like mercantilism,
Yes.
sort of transition between, you know, serfdom and capitalism.
Yeah. So this leads into mercantilism, where basically we see a rise of artisans and guilds and things like that would actually lead to like markets. This would eventually form into capitalism. So what we're seeing is the proto birth of capitalism.
Yeah, the merchants really start to have their come up.
Yeah, the merchants start to have their
And the transatlantic slave trade.
yes, that too.
Like, that's when the exploitation of human beings gets ramped up.
Yeah. As we mentioned with Italy, who was the hardest hit during the Black Death, the refocus on things led to a reintroduction of the classics, which eventually would lead to the Renaissance. The Renaissance is, of course, important for the formation of the modern world because the Renaissance would lead into the scientific revolution, which would lead into the Age of Enlightenment, which would lead into the Age of Revolution.
And syphilis still existed.
Of course.
I mentioned
syphilis.
I mentioned the 100 Years' War during this time. Combined with the war, the population of France was devastated, losing half its population.
Jeez.
With England losing about 33% of their population. The 100 Years' War, along with the devastation of the Black Death, would lead to the end of the feudal, like, raising a standing army, and would lead to actually the creation of professional armies that would actually just get paid as opposed to. So this kind of led to a more centralized focus on government, which was not the thing during feudalism, because yes, while there was a central king in England and France, their power was derived from the power that the lords would give them.
Much more of a balance as opposed to a real strong central authority.
Yeah. We can't leave here without talking about the rise in
fanaticism.
Fanaticism, thank you. I typed it up wrong. As is always the case in these situations, the targeted people were, of course, the Jewish people.
Just always getting the short end of the stick, dude.
Seriously sucks. Not fair.
They're actually in Mainz, thank you, and Cologne. Their Jewish population was absolutely devastated, just almost wiped out completely.
From the plague?
No,
or from people attacking?
Burning at the stake.
That's absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Executions.
I don't understand why they get blamed for everything, because it's not like Jesus wasn't a Jew himself.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing that scapegoating minorities is a, relic of the past and not something we do in the present.
Yeah, we definitely don't do it right now. There's definitely not people who are beating up, people who are of Asian descent because, it's the China virus.
It's so fucked
This
up.
would actually lead to a mass migration of the Jewish population to Poland and Eastern Europe.
We know how that goes, unfortunately.
Meanwhile, in Muslim Spain, Jewish people had more freedom.
Yeah,
Reminder. Let's get going.
Yeah.
Like, the only thing that the Moors who ran Spain actually cared about at all was that they made the Christians and the Jews pay higher taxes.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yep, that was it. You pay your tax and you can just do your own thing. And it's funny because their way of looking at it was like, yeah, you guys are super wrong, so not even worth it. But different sect of Islam, you're wrong, but you're closer in proximity to us, so we're going to show you how wrong you are.
So dumb.
Now, these weren't the only. The Jews were one of the biggest attacks. You also had attacks on the Romani, the different sects of non-Christians who were Christians but weren't the right kind of Christian, even though there was really only the Catholic Church this time. But you know what I mean, different sects. And of course, Cameron mentioned burnings at the stake and all that other fun stuff that comes with these things, because you're just looking for a scapegoat at this point. Because when people don't know what causes disease, you look for things like that.
Yeah, very true.
And especially when you just don't have any cultivated cosmopolitan culture. Cosmopolitan might not be the right word, but even when it was happening during the Roman Republic, when there's some sort of stronger central society and culture and precedent of people trying to understand things, we had people like Procopius hypothesizing what could be the cause. But when you're in a feudal order where everyone is either just this spoiled fancy lad noble or just someone whose only life experience is working in the dirt to try not to starve to death, then you're just not going to have the same room for trying to understand things.
Mhm.
And at that point, that's when you start burning people at the stake.
So this of course relates to another instance of religious fervor, which again would eventually tie back into mistakes the clergy would make that would eventually lead to the Reformation.
Yeah.
So just to wrap this all up, by any estimate, 75 to 200 million people died during the Black Death. It's one of the most devastating pandemics of all time.
Which, again, it's worth reiterating. In the present, we have more than 7 billion people on Earth. So even though that number still sounds terrible, it's actually more terrible when you account for the fact that there was not nearly the world population back then that we have now. So that many millions of people during that time is even more horrific than we could conceive of.
Yes. That being said, the move towards actually pulling people off, like being tied to the land and actually allowing them to make some money off of it is a positive step, even if, it led to capitalism, which is absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Real double-edged sword there.
Yeah. These kind of things also lead to a more centralized government, which is necessary to combat things like this. While the Black Death is considered to end at 1353, the Bubonic Plague would have sporadic outbreaks again throughout the 14th, the 15th, 16th century, basically up until the invention of antibiotics, which would help eradicate it, as David will inevitably get to when we get to his. And that's the Black Death, although postscript, Caroline.
So I found a book at our local library. Hey, everybody, you want to do some research, want to get free books, go check out your local library. It doesn't cost anything to start up. And if you're in Los Angeles, if you forget to return a book, there's no fees.
Shout out to libraries, which actually, by the way, just going off of that, more and more libraries around the country are just getting rid of late fees because they realize that trying to deal with them costs more money than just letting it slide.
Totally makes
If
sense.
the punishment for a infraction is a fine, then it only affects poor people.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And who's going to libraries? I know I am, and I'm poor.
Right. And also, by taking away the fees, people actually are more likely to then return them later anyway. So they still
that's actually a good point.
They're more likely to go back.
I have one that's like an old book that my sister never turned in, and I'm like, oh, if it was in Anaheim, I would just return it. But now I think I've busted up that number of late fees in Anaheim. So sorry, Anaheim Public Library.
Oh no, they're our number one fans. Caroline, you've imperiled us all.
I'm so sorry.
And that was the first part of our Great Plagues episode. Part 2 will be coming to you sooner rather than later. Thanks for listening and stay tuned.